Book TV on C-SPAN 2. All books, all weekend, every weekend.
You're watching primetime news of Radio Television Serbia. One woman is dead, 12 people are injured, various degrees of injuries in today's attack of the NATO aggressor alliance on Valjevo. The NATO alliance bombed today Šabac as well. 4 missiles hit almost the center of the town, close to the school of Lazar Lazarevic, sport facilities and residential areas. The target of the aggressor were also the areas of Sremska Mitrovica, Fruška Gora, civilian facilities in Prizren, Suva Reka. NATO airplanes hit also civilian targets near Belgrade, Leskovac, Fruška Gora, Vladičin Han, Niš, Vranje, Šabac and villages in the area of Srbica. Last night around 11:11 p.m. the criminal alliance hit with 2 missiles and destroyed completely the overpass on the highway Belgrade-Niš near the village Tripala. In the last few days, this is the 3rd attack of the aggressor on this infrastructural facility, the strongest one to date. So they also greatly damaged the railroad to Skopje from the explosions. Many window panes are broken on houses in Tripala village. At the same time, the criminals hit the northwestern part of Niš with 3 cluster bombs. At the same time, 25 minutes after midnight, there was one more strong explosion. Throughout that time, our anti-aircraft units responded energetically. This image tells you also how our Serbian farmers respond to the NATO criminals by continuing their farming activities. The target of the NATO aggressors at 12:42 today were also civilian targets in Valjevo County. The villages Donja Grabovica and Jasenica were directly hit. The houses of Mile Krunic and Radislav Simeonovic were hit. Tens of houses are severely damaged or destroyed. After several hours of low flights by the NATO airplanes, there was a 3rd attack on the southern part of Vranje. There are no injured people, but huge damage. There are new damages on the printing plant in Yugoslavia, the bus terminal, the tobacco factory has broken window panes, but the production continued. Due to the constant attempts of the terrorists to penetrate our territory with the help of the Albanian army and NATO Air Force, we visited the border area near the checkpoint Mitar Bojnovic, where our defenders have prevented over the last 15 days the entry of several terrorist gangs supported by the Albanian army and the NATO planes. We walked along the borderline all the way to a border marker close to the Albanian checkpoint Zogaj. These terrorists continually try to enter our territory, but our defenders prevent them. This thwarts the NATO plans to use the terrorists as an advance to ground troops. As soon as they noticed that from the Albanian side, they opened imprecise fire from mortar launchers. Several buildings here that you can see used to be terrorist strongholds. From there, many terrorists, as well as mujahedins and other mercenaries, tried to enter our territory. Behind the camp is an antenna, which they use for radio communications. After heavy losses in their attempt to enter Kosovo, the terrorists withdrew deeper into Albania. However, at the hill behind Zogaj, we noticed U.S. combat helicopter of the type Seahawk and several armored vehicles. Americans obviously are trying to use Albania as their military base, and they have a reconnaissance center to guide the Albanian artillery from this hill onto our territory. NATO Air Force guides the Albanian terrorists towards our territory. This terrorist NATO base is an incontrovertible evidence of the union of NATO, the Albanian army and the terrorists in their joint aggression against our country. Despite this alliance, though, our defenders successfully defend the land border, preventing land aggression, which has been activated in Albania since about 40 days ago. Despite the daily attacks by NATO that is trying to endanger our territory in this zone of responsibility, and despite the large groups of terrorists in the areas right behind us on the territory of Albania, the situation in our zone of responsibility is exceptionally stable, and it will remain so, and we are sure that nobody will pass through here. The heroism and determination of our people to defend us from the aggression is attested to by presence of women from the Pristina Corps in the front lines. Here, close to the checkpoint of Zogaj, we found Radica Lukicevic. What brought you here? Given the fact that my husband is a border guard, it's very realistic that I'm here. I left in Kraljevo my 5-year-old son, and I came here to help so that we can fight together for his better future and a better future for all children and peaceful life. The heroism in the defense of the border, the admirable will and determination of the defenders to protect the state borders are a sure obstacle to possible ground troops of the NATO alliance and the terrorists from Albania. The NATO criminals do not seem to be satiated by the deathly assaults on our country, primarily on civilian targets. These days, they continue to sell one more media manipulation about the alleged ghost towns and villages of Kosovo. These images, recorded today in Pristina, Kosovska Mitrovica, Lipljan, Obilić, Kosovo Polje, and several villages nearby, are the best rebuttal of such lies. We had many discussions with Albanians here about their life, their work, their suffering, and everything they've been exposed to because of the bombings by NATO. In my village, nobody ran away any place, neither to Macedonia, nor to Albania, nor wherever else. We are all here, so everybody's here. Yes, if you ask me to tell you the truth, personally to ask you, I wouldn't say that they should come to command us. I used to live like a little king, as they say. And now they bomb us, they bomb everywhere in Pristina, in Lipljan. And you are Isen, by ethnicity, Albanian. We came here to get some flour from our wheat in the mill. We have nothing else. This is the food. From which village? Velika Dobranja. We cannot continue living like this. It's very difficult. NATO hits us at night, at day, and there's nothing. Are you afraid? Yes, of course. When they bomb you, of course. What's your name? Bachiriadem. I don't know whether they have any human blood within them. I would really ask if this goes through satellite, please, if Clinton could listen to this, and his daughter, I heard he has a daughter, I would ask her if she has children, or maybe she will have children in the future. She knows what is a love towards a child. She should take her father to a psychiatrist to check what's happening to his brain. Does he have blood? Or is this a beast? This is really abnormal. We cannot manage. I mean, little children here, and they're so afraid. What's your name? Ebrija. From Lipljan. I'm from Rabovic. We have a shop, Extra. From Lipljan there is a guy who manages the shop. Thank God there is everything, but we go to town, and like today, market day. So what do you think about the bombing? People are afraid? I can't sleep all night long. This NATO shakes the houses, everything. I don't know what to tell you more. Are the children afraid? Of course they are. I have a 2-year-old daughter. As soon as she hears a plane, she runs away. What can we send as a message to these criminals from this place? The voice of the people can always be heard, and people always say they should stop. They should stop bombing. But they don't respect us. I have nothing else. Hello. I wish you good work. Thank you very much. There is good work. Yes, yes, a lot of work now. How long do you work during the day? Can you satisfy the needs of the citizens of Obilić? Oh, we've been working non-stop all day long. And the people have enough bread, and that's it. How would you comment the bombing every day? Like every other citizen. We condemn these criminals, and we send a message that they should stop the bombing, that we can live, that we can get going, that we can live together, as we used to live together. Yes, like before. Tell me, can we all live together in this area like we used to? Of course, why not? Nothing is a problem. We can work together again. What's your name? Tana i Sulja. This is a terrible distraction that they're doing. What NATO is doing here, not a single country could withhold my children. So far, I have 80-some years on my back, but we haven't seen this kind of wonder until now. What can I say as a message? They should be embarrassed. If there is God, may He punish them. We as old people tell them this, nothing else. This is a force. It's not a force, it's a shame, it's an embarrassment, what they're doing. So much children from me. What's your name? Peljivan Rustem. So this is what the Albanians from Kosovo say in Kosovo. This was recorded with our camera for the sake of truth, but also for Jamie Shade, the NATO spokesman, so that he stopped deceiving the public. The President of the Assembly of Serbia, Dragan Tomic, received today the former head of the U.S. Justice Department, Ramsey Clark, who is visiting our country. It was mutually agreed that NATO's aggression on Serbia and Yugoslavia is a criminal action that has to end immediately because that's a prerequisite for a political solution of the Kosovo crisis. These attacks on a sovereign state have so far broken all of the UN charters and international law. They're aimed at destroying a freedom-loving nation that has never been an occupier, but has always contributed greatly to the world peace. The escalation of military actions and bombing has led to a systematic killing of civilians and destruction of civilian facilities throughout Yugoslavia, a crime against humanity and a mindlessness that has to end. It was noted that the future developments in this region will have a strong impact on the international relations as a whole. We therefore must seek a political solution immediately, which has been unreservedly supported by the Yugoslav leadership and President Milosevic. Ramsey Clark condemned the NATO bombing and expressed his willingness to continue his actions in order to stop this inhumane aggression and bring back peace as soon as possible. We must do everything to stop this mindlessness now, said Clark, adding that the goal of his visit was to strengthen the voice against violence brought about by NATO and to seek a mutually agreed upon peace plan. At the end of the meeting, it was concluded that the political process has to define the status of Kosovo as an autonomous unit within Serbia on the principles of sovereignty and integrity and equality of all citizens and ethnic communities. The former U.S. Justice Department Secretary Ramsey Clark held a press conference in the Belgrade City Library. He openly criticized the aggressive and militaristic policy of Bill Clinton, expressing full solidarity with the Serbian people. The bombs falling from the sky cannot distinguish among the 26 ethnic groups of Yugoslavia, do not spare women and children, but destroy historic monuments, hospitals, schools, and above all, your dear memories. I'm in awe of your courage and unity, said Clark, and I sincerely hope that the real truth about the destruction of this beautiful country will win. And Mr. Clinton, who is spending millions of dollars on these bombs, I would appreciate him a lot more if he would use this money to invest it in Serbia and all of the countries where he has caused crisis and wars. Foreign Affairs Minister Živadin Jovanovic received Sven Robinson, member of the Canadian Parliament. Sven Robinson stressed that he came to Yugoslavia to learn firsthand about the consequences of the NATO bombing and about the position of the Yugoslav government regarding a peaceful political solution for Kosovo. He said that his new Democratic Party, with 21 parliamentary seats, opposes the bombing of NATO and appeals for a political resolution as soon as possible. The Foreign Minister Jovanovic briefed the Canadian parliamentarian on the consequences of the aggression, especially the civilian casualties and the destruction of civilian infrastructure. The Yugoslav minister stressed the position of the Yugoslav government that a peaceful solution for Kosovo be sought exclusively by political means with respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Serbia and Yugoslavia and respect for the multi-ethnic composition of Serbia in that part. To achieve this, the aggression and politics of dictate must end, stressed our minister. The Vice President of the Serbian Assembly, Professor Dr. Vladimir Štambok, also received the Canadian guest, the President of the Foreign Relations Committee of the New Democratic Party of Canada, Sven Robinson. 15 members of the interagency mission of the UN that are currently visiting Yugoslavia visited Pančevo, specifically the Petrochemia factory and the nitrogen production plant, two of the 4 factories that NATO disabled for operation. To remind you, this interagency mission of the UN has been visiting Yugoslavia, has been here since the 16th of May. The delegation of the UN, headed by Sergio de Mello, visited today Pančevo, the city that will enter history as the first town in which chemical plant has been bombed. The head of the South Banat County, Zoran Nikolic, told the delegation that the citizens of South Banat, despite great destructions of bridges and factories and suffering of civilians, that they remain unified and even more determined to protect the sovereignty, freedom, and territorial integrity of the country. He also asked the delegation to do everything in their power to stop the aggression and return peace, because this is the only way to bring back confidence into the UN and other international organizations that were created as a civilizational accomplishment after World War II. During the visit of the factory for fertilizers and nitrogen, members of the delegation of the UN saw the consequences of the destruction, as well as the fact that these factories have nothing to do with military industry, that their production is primarily civilian, exclusively civilian. The destruction of the fertilizer factory that also produced ammonia for all other factories is also a hit against the production of food in Yugoslavia. This was said by the director of this plant, Mizalin Džindo, and says that this denies America's claim that they are trying to use this aggression to fight for human rights. Members of the Foreign Affairs Ministry, headed by the Deputy Director for Multilateral Activities, Milisav Pajic, visited today in the medical center in Belgrade Nils Carlsberg and Rashid Kaliko, members of the UN mission that are currently visiting Yugoslavia. These 2 members were injured today in a traffic accident close to Zrenjanin while touring the area hit by the aggression of NATO. On behalf of the Foreign Affairs Minister Živadin Jovanovic, our representatives of the ministry expressed wishes for quick recovery of these 2 UN officials. Mr. Carlsberg and Mr. Kaliko have received medical assistance and feel better, and they expressed their gratitude to our medical personnel for their attention and professionalism. The Serbian Commissioner for Refugees, Bratislava Morina, also visited the injured members of the UN mission in the hospital center in Belgrade. On the night between May 14th and 15th, more than 86 civilians, mostly women and children of Albanian ethnicity, were brutally killed in the attack on the refugee convoy near Korisha. This was stated today by the spokesman of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Nebojša Vujovic, to local and foreign journalists at the press center of the Army of Yugoslavia. Thus far, the investigation led by Judge Yusuf Skender has located 81 bodies of Albanian refugees. Unfortunately, this number is not finite. 61 refugees have been transferred to Prizren Hospital, 8 are in critical condition, 5 have second and third degree burns. Among those critically injured are children younger than 15. The military and civilian authorities determined that the convoy of Albanian refugees that were going back to their homes were hit 3 times with 8 missiles. The effects of this monstrous massacre is horrifying because bombs create a temperature over 2,000 degrees. Additional time is certainly needed to identify more precisely all the casualties. Responding to the foreign journalist, Jovic stressed and denied the false accusations of the NATO spokesman that these refugees were used as a living shield, because within a radius of 5 kilometers from this place of the attack, there are no military nor police facilities, but there is no lie that could persuade us that these refugees were living shields. This is the most monstrous attack of NATO over civilians, this time in Korisha. But to remind you, NATO has bombed refugee camps in Niš, Loznica, Priština, refugees on the road, Prizren, Đakovica, flagrant violation of the UN Charter on protection of civilians and encouragement of all terrorist groups in the world. Obviously, there is no safe return of refugees as long as NATO is bombing us. Despite the continued NATO bombing, there is wide diplomatic activity primarily aimed at reaching an agreement on the pending resolution of the UN Security Council on the resolution of the Kosovo crisis and the end of the aggression. The special Russian envoy Chernomyrdin, for example, is visiting Helsinki, but Kosovo crisis is discussed in many other European capitals. As one of the key elements for the resolution of the Kosovo crisis comes a pending meeting between the special Russian envoy for Yugoslavia, Viktor Chernomyrdin, the president of Finland, Martti Ahtisaari, who is also representative of the EU, and Strobe Talbot, the Deputy Secretary of State of the US. The goal of this three-party meeting is to narrow the differences between Moscow and Washington regarding the political solution of the Balkan problems. As Chernomyrdin stated prior to the meeting, Russia's main objective is to end the bombardment. At the meeting in Helsinki, the proposals of the G8 countries should also be reformulated into a draft resolution for the UN Security Council, thus bringing the World Organization into the process and substituting the military action with peace resolution. So far, Moscow and Washington have different approaches regarding the international force that should be in Kosovo. Namely, Washington continues to insist on NATO participation, but Moscow opposes this. The results of the Helsinki meeting will be given to Belgrade by Chernomyrdin and Ahtisaari. As reported by the presidential press office in Moscow, Boris Yeltsin had a conversation with the Spanish Prime Minister José María Aznar. Yeltsin stressed that NATO's aggression not only prevents a political resolution for Kosovo, but undermines some of the key accomplishments in international relations. As a result of force, we have a humanitarian disaster in the region, stressed the President of Russia. After his meeting with the Spanish Prime Minister Aznar, the Russian Prime Minister designate Stepashin stated that Spain, like most NATO countries, opposes the escalation of the military actions. Aznar said that Russia and other member countries agree on the necessity of political solution, but there are still important differences regarding the international peacekeepers. The Council of Ministers of EU at its Brussels meeting adopted a resolution that gives support to the principles for political solution of Kosovo crisis issued at the Ministerial Conference of the G8 countries in Bonn. Still, there are some differences among the members of NATO regarding the strategy on further military engagement. The head of the Russian diplomacy, Igor Ivanov, stated after the meeting that Russia continues to insist on an immediate end of the bombardment to allow for a diplomatic path out of the crisis. Ivanov appealed for a continued work on the Security Council resolution and announced the meeting of the political leaders of the G8 countries on Wednesday. The situation in the Balkans and Kosovo was also discussed by the heads of diplomacy of France and Greece. Iber Vedrin said that the two countries agreed to remain in close contact, while Papandreou said that the political process leading to the UN resolution is delicate, but expressed hope that it will be accomplished, thus marking the end of the war and beginning of a new era of peace in Yugoslavia. Papandreou proposed to the Council of Ministers of EU to stop the bombing for about 48 hours. The Italian Prime Minister Massimo D'Alema, after his meeting with the German Chancellor Schröder, said that the two countries are considering a possible political solution for Kosovo and adoption of a resolution by the UN Security Council. Italy and Germany will be for a strong action towards a just peace in the Balkans. The German Chancellor Schröder stated that for a political solution of the crisis, it is necessary to adopt the resolution of the Security Council based on the principles accepted at the G8 meeting. He stressed that German ground troops are out of question. A representative of the Chinese Foreign Ministry stated in Beijing that the end of the bombardment is a prerequisite for a political solution in Kosovo. The threat of bombs doesn't allow a chance for peace. China demands an end of the bombing, stressing that they have caused a lot of human suffering and the greatest humanitarian disaster after the Second World War in Europe. This has shaken the regional peace and stability, as Beijing stresses, and they add that the problem in Kosovo has to be resolved by political means with an adequate role of the UN. The official ministry spokesman said that Washington essentially must respect the territorial integrity of Yugoslavia. They also denied that they were going to accept an American representative to explain the attack on the Chinese embassy in Belgrade. They said that Washington has to conduct investigation and punish those responsible for the bombing. They stressed they would not accept improvisations, denying the speculations of a renewal of Sino-US military contacts. The public support for the NATO aggression in the US has dropped to its lowest levels, while there is much greater support for a dialogue with the President of Yugoslavia, Slobodan Milosevic, for the sake of a political solution. These are the results of the latest poll by ABC News and Washington Post. 59% of Americans have declared to support negotiations. The poll shows that Clinton is quickly losing ground for his hardline policy in Kosovo. Washington Post writes that the public opinion from Asia and Africa to Latin America more and more opposed to NATO's aggression. U.S. attempts to use humanitarian objectives as an alibi has caused strong anti-NATO reactions in countries very familiar with U.S. interventionism and Europe's colonialism. The protests are growing in developing countries as well, who are embittered because of the role of the U.S. The Green Party of the Germans will demand of the Bundestag adoption of a decision that will demand Chancellor Schröder to ask for an end of the aggression. This was stated for the Berliner Morgenpost, the spokeswoman of the Green Party, Kerstin Miller. This should be the beginning of a real political solution. The French weekly Marianne published an interview with the war correspondent of the LA Times, Paul Watson, who accuses NATO of a humanitarian disaster in the southern Serbian province. The Western politicians should be honest in their evaluation of the situation and recognize their responsibility for Albanian refugees, says Watson, adding that the waves of refugees began only with NATO's bombing. He stressed that he has been doing his journalist work in Kosovo freely without censorship. The aggression of the alliance against Yugoslavia has to stop immediately. We have to sit down at a negotiation table and find peaceful resolution. This was stated in Ohrid by the leader of the parliamentary opposition of Macedonia, Branko Crvenkovski. He said that Macedonia has to remain neutral. Not a single foreign soldier should enter Yugoslavia from its territory without the consent of Belgrade, because Macedonia would thus find itself on the side of the aggressor. Crvenkovski reiterated in terms of the security of the country, that Arben Jaferi, the first man of the Party of Democratic Albanians, rules Macedonia. Jaferi decides when and how much Macedonian borders will be open, in which way the domestic and the foreign policy of Macedonia will go, which is opposed to Macedonian strategic interests. London Times published a statement of the former Albanian president, Berisha, who condemns the terrorist KLA, describing it as an assembly of competing gangs governed by theft and crime. Berisha accuses the Tirana government of arms trafficking and living off money received from the so-called KLA. He also claims that the terrorists of this organization killed the Kosovo politician Faith Migani. British analysts showed that the divisions among Kosovo Albanians threaten with great instability in Albania. Italian public is embittered because NATO planes are throwing bombs into the Adriatic Sea. The mayor of Venice initiated an investigation after last week's injury of 3 fishermen by cluster bombs that they captured in their nets. parallel with this investigation, military authorities of Italy have begun wide-ranging search and destruction action for cluster bombs disposed by NATO in the Bay of Venice. The cleaning of the sea will certainly take 15 days at least. The NATO bombs, and among them the internationally forbidden cluster bombs, are also sought by a special ship that will be soon reinforced by 2 more combat boats of the Italian Navy. The prosecutor Matteo Struccelli, who is conducting this investigation, said to the journalist that these bombs showed to be produced in the US. The London paper Evening Standard warns that over the past 3 decades of conflicts in Northern Ireland, a lot more people were forced out of their homes than is the case in Kosovo. That ethnic cleansing is, however, hidden from British public. Prime Minister Blair doesn't seem to care about this. This ethnic cleansing has intensified over the past year in a period that Tony Blair states as a time of a functioning peace accord. The paper notes that out of Belfast, 60,000 Protestants have moved out over the past few months seeking safety in areas without Catholics. People throughout the world continue to oppose more and more the aggression of NATO against Yugoslavia. Protests against this aggression on a sovereign state are more and more frequent and numerous. Protests continue today in Vienna, Stuttgart, Stockholm, Toronto, Vancouver, and other cities. Tomorrow at 6 p.m. in Linz, there'll be a great protest meeting under the title "Bombs Do Not Bring Peace." The organizer is an Austrian institution, Peace Workshop, which is preparing similar gatherings in Regensburg, Passau, and Ingolstadt. We are giving you an atmosphere from the streets of Amsterdam, where you have Yugoslavs and Dutch people expressing their protest against the bombardment by NATO forces on Yugoslavia. The protest march with several thousand people was increasing continually. Many citizens were joining the people continually. At the protest in the center of town, representatives of peace organizations from Holland spoke. They demanded from their government and the international community to stop these groundless attacks on a sovereign country and seek an exit in peace negotiations. Similar messages could be read on numerous placards. The protest meeting was surrounded by a lot of police, but there were no incidents. We organized ourselves together with our Dutch colleagues from the peace organizations, and we got this idea to organize joint demonstrations in Amsterdam. As you can see, you have a lot of response by Yugoslavs and Dutch people, and I hope next time we will have even more people participating. Last time when we organized the European demonstrations in The Hague, the Dutch protesters were quite present, so now we cooperate very well with these organizations. I would greet all of the Yugoslavs in Yugoslavia, all of our Serbs, Gypsies, Muslims, all of the ethnic groups that live in Yugoslavia. I want them to be strong, just as we are trying to support them from here. We're not suffering what they're suffering there, but we have a hard time because we are not with them. But at least there is somebody behind their back to defend them with words, if not with guns. We love you a lot. From Holland. And be strong.
Tomorrow morning.